Like a client comes to mind that during COVID, he couldn't get out of his room. He was in there for like 6 months.
Hey guys, and welcome to Day in the Life podcast. We decided to launch this podcast because we're super passionate about helping other people discover their divine purpose and helping guide them into doing exactly what they're called to do and help them find their potential and passion.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of Day in the Life podcast. My name's Isaac. Got Cianna here with me, my wife, and we're really excited for today's episode as we talk to Sam, who I've got here with me. He's one of my good friends, also one of the youngest clinical psychologists that I've ever met, and I'm pumped to hear his story today. So welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And maybe we'll just start by just really simply what kind of sparked your interest in psychology?
Yeah, it was probably the journey started around grade 10 when I was watching this show called The Mentalist. So the show is essentially about this like I don't even know, like he used to do kind of side gigs, but he was very good at watching body language.
Yeah.
And very in tune with people and watching their behaviours. And he would essentially solve crimes by noticing how people would operate, their behaviours, how they would move, their body language, which got me into this whole, I suppose, fascination with how people operate, how their brains work, how their thoughts kind of move into their behaviours. So that was kind of like the hook, I suppose, into psychology. And then really it was just like it started with that interest of like I find thoughts in the brain and behaviour very fascinating, how people move, the different intricacies of how people's experiences really impact who they are today.
Yeah.
And so that's probably, I suppose the journey that started that, but then it's really, I've definitely fallen in love with psychology the more that I've like had to do it, so.
It's good.
Yeah.
I love that. I've like already learnt so much that
Oh, really?
psychology isn't just like listening to what they say, but it's everything. It's like body language. It's like there's so much more involved than just what the person is just saying to you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much under the surface. It's very much an iceberg type profession.
Yeah.
Where, you get the surface level stuff, but there's so much underneath to a person. Their behaviours, their beliefs, their family of origin, all that kind of stuff. It all kind of comes together. So it's very cool.
Is there like different forms of psychology? Like, do you specialize in a specific type of psychology?
So there's kind of like, there's different endorsements, which is probably the official one. So you can be a general psychologist, and that's kind of like almost like a GP, like they're very jack of all trades. Then you can be endorsed. So I'm a clinical psychologist, which means that I kind of I'm trained to see the top kind of end, like the juicier end of, I suppose, client presentations where they might be more severe, more impactful, that kind of stuff. There's educational psychologists, so they're more like schools. Developmental psychs, so they're more children, kind of adolescents.
I remember when in year 10 I travelled to England to play soccer, and they got like one of the lead sports psychologists to come and talk to us.
Yes, yeah.
And they spoke to us for like an hour, and I was so like fired up by the end of it. I was like, yeah, let's just go kick people. I was like so pumped. Like I was just, they were very
kick shoes.
they were actually really inspiring, and like kind of talked about how because this particular guy, Manchester United in like early 2000s, at some point they had like a crisis where like they were having a series of runs of bad games, and they got this guy in to talk to them all and
fix the mindset.
Fix the mindset and so on.
Which is a huge thing, right?
Yeah, it's cool.
Huge thing.
So what point did you go, this is the job that I want to do, and these are the things that I need to do to get there? Were you in year 11, 12, or like...
Yeah, I don't know. And that's probably the weird thing with my journey. Like, there was never a moment where I was definitely like, I don't know, I'm shooting for this kind of thing. I just almost kind of stumbled into it.
Yeah.
So I never set on a track and went, yep, this is what I'm aiming for. It was kind of like definitely a lot of small steps to get there. And creating almost where I am now, which I think is something that's kind of, I don't know, something important, I suppose, that in that particular age range, I feel like a lot of people have that pressure to already have it figured out.
Make big decisions, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But for me, it was like, oh, this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm
Yeah.
going to give it a crack. And then I suppose fell in love with it as I kept going.
Yeah.
So yeah, I watched The Mentalist, was really keen, and then I opened up this like careers book that we used to have back in the day, and then looked at kind of like the description of psychology, saw that it was like behavior, brains, all that kind of stuff. I was like, all right, well, I'll give that a crack. This is the OP that I needed. Got into that, and then throughout kind of like university and the process of that was just really fell in love with it with university, and it was like, this is so cool, the theory behind it. We didn't practice, we didn't actually do like a client session until masters, so that was a bit difficult to kind of be like, is this something that I actually want to do? And that was the 5th year until we actually got like experience, like
Yep.
actually in
Wow.
a
So with
setting.
psychology, is it just the one degree? You do a Bachelor of Psych and then you're a clinical psychologist? Or like, how do you kind of go into each of those fields you mentioned before?
Yeah, what's the pathway?
Yeah. So for me, I did a Bachelor of Psychology, and that's 3 years. And then there's honours, which is a 4th year. And then from honours, you have to do like a master's degree to be a practicing psychologist.
If you were to just stop at honours level, for instance, what would you be able to do with that? Research?
You can definitely flick into, so after you do a bachelor's, you can do a PhD in psychology, which is like research, and, you can do, university stuff, you can do, there's a stack of research in psychology that's super helpful, that kind of feeds a lot of the clinical side of it, so people are going out there testing out what works, what doesn't.
But then to go into clinical, you've got to go to the master's level.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So there's people that do both. Hats off to them. But yeah, so that's the kind of road that I took. I enjoy people. I enjoy the iceberg side of people in psychology. So that's why I went into Masters of Clinical. So all up, it took me 7 years because it was the 4 year of bachelor's and honours. Then I started a Masters of Professional, and then flicked into another Masters of Clinical Psychology. So
Wow.
out of it, I got 2 masters, which sounds really cool, but a bit more on the old Hextet. So,
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
but yeah, so
That's
That's
so
really
cool.
cool.
So do
It's
you
a
have
journey.
like a preferred like therapeutic approach, like a preferred style of when you sit down with a patient of talking with them, or
like a therapy style,
yeah, like are there
like a
different
technique, or
are there different types of techniques you can use?
Yeah,
Like
does that
when-
change patient to patient, or do you kind of start with the same method? So like in med, someone walks in, we do history, exam, investigations, whatever, work out a plan. Is it kind of the same, or?
yeah, I think so definitely you would start with history and obviously go through kind of their back end. What's their family like, what's their schooling, their education, all that kind of history gathering. And then, there's a stack of different kind of theories out there and techniques that has a lot of evidence around what would help. So there's classic is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's probably the gold standard for psychology.
That is like the only one I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was,
I don't
I
even
was
know if
hoping
there's
you'd
others.
talk about
Yeah.
this.
it's very popular. And it works.
Yes.
Like it's very, there's a stack of evidence saying that CBT is on the same playing field and same effectiveness as medication for like anxiety, depression.
Amazing. Wow.
Makes sense, because if I suppose, like if you look at kind of, you and medical degrees, that's kind of like the ship, I suppose, where psychology is almost helping the captain of the ship. So if you're able to help him out, he can steer the ship a bit better, not go into rocks or whatever, or not sink the ship. So CBT is amazing because it helps with changing the thoughts, which then impact the behavior, how you interact with the world, how you
Totally.
engage with your life, how you filter in the information that you receive from life.
Yes.
And what to do with that.
Yes.
So it's very impactful into how an individual moves throughout their life. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah, I love it.
So that's one.
Yeah.
The one that I'm loving at the moment is called schema therapy. So it's a bit of a newer one. Schema therapy, or schemas, are like, I suppose, core beliefs that are formed through childhood that help kind of impact the person and how they operate into their adulthood. So a classic one is emotional deprivation. So if I had that schema, I would go, no one's going to support my needs. No one's going to match the needs that I need in any particular moment. So if I'm feeling sad, if I'm feeling anxious, if I'm feeling depressed.
Wow.
No one's going to want to support me and meet me in that need. And then from that, you can imagine there's a whole bunch of coping mechanisms and behaviors to protect, to defend, to avoid from that. And so if we can notice those kind of core beliefs or schemas, help heal that, then that's obviously going to help the individual, the client, to have a much better life in their adulthood. So
that's so cool, because like the way and you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing this is your job is, everyone can see the fruit. So like the behaviors of people's lives, but really it sounds like the clinical psychologist's job is to work out, try and get down to the root system and what's actually producing those fruit and try to fix that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
It's like a wiring of the person, hey?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what kind of person do you think would be like attracted to doing what you're doing?
That's a good question. A curious person, like very inquisitive. It's a lot of pattern recognition. So that kind of looking at someone creatively and seeing and kind of like problem solving a little bit and just, really sussing out what's going on for them. So that's probably there's almost like a science base to it where it's very diagnosis driven. What are the symptoms here? Does that fit into, differential diagnosis that you would know? Kind of teasing out what it's not and what it is, and then from there you kind of have your runs of therapy that would help that individual. But then there's almost like an art form to it too, where it's that human side, that creative side, that ability to connect with people, to make them feel like someone cares, which I think is so important. A cool research that I'm really thinking about lately is there was a famous research done by a guy called Miller in 1997, and he essentially measured the factors of therapy that impacts upon a client's benefit or like a client's improvement. 15% of the client's improvement was based on the actual therapy. 30% was on the connection that they had and the understanding on the actual therapist. So regardless of but a huge...
You could be not so good at the therapy,
Right.
but if you're a great person that
you're
they
great-
connect with.
100%. So it's like...
Oh, yeah.
And that's just... And, hopefully that encourages someone where it's... You don't have to have it necessarily all together in the technical side.
Yeah.
As long as you make the person feel your bedside manner, all that
Exactly.
kind of stuff.
It's like
so
having
important.
the heart for the
Yeah.
person, hey, having
Yeah.
a heart for people, being
Yeah.
caring and I guess generous, self-sacrificial as well.
Caring, inquisitive kind of person is going to go a long way in this.
But then on a general level, like us as people, just being a good person is so important. Like, someone comes to you and they're kind of going through something. You don't need to have the right words, but just being there, understanding, being loving, caring, all that, so powerful.
Yeah.
So, very cool.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
awesome. Has there been any moments, because obviously you're in a patient-therapist relationship, you're doing a lot of the, I guess, giving, they're doing a lot of the taking. Well, like, do you find yourself kind of drained at the end of the day, or
Oh, that's a good
are there
question.
things...
It's a spicy one, yeah.
Are there, and do you have like certain coping mechanisms? Because obviously there's like in anything, there's always bad coping mechanisms with stress and fatigue and so on. Or like, being the psychologist that you are you aware of what you need to refill that cup so you can go again the next day?
Yeah, good question. Well, I feel like for me, like I personally am an introvert. So I love the way that I'm wired is I need that time kind of alone to fill. So a lot of, not necessarily an output, but it is, as you said, it's a lot of giving. It's a lot of switching on a professional kind of stance to provide, which you would both feel as well. Yeah, in terms of filling, it's definitely like, we call it, my wife and I call it defragging, where it's just that ability to switch off, not think about a client, not think about a problem that's kind of ticking through in one of their lives. It's just something for the brain to switch off, to just meld through something. Perhaps that's a guy thing where we just appreciate that kind of thinking about nothing space. But that's really important. I think the social processing is really important too. So I'll talk to my wife about not necessarily client stuff, but just go like, hey, feeling X, Y, Z today, feeling really drained about this, feeling really, I had a tough client today that, I'm just thinking about a lot, and just kind of express that. And I think that that's really important, A, in terms of marriage, but B, just to process it yourself. Because I think the more that you hold those kind of things, it's dangerous for me, because that can bottle up. The emotion has to escape somehow, right? So
Totally.
Got to do it in a healthy way, as you were talking about.
Do you find you have certain things that help you to not get like empathy fatigue or?
Yeah, that's another good question. I feel like for me it's a bit of a blessing that's probably a bit of God's grace on that. For me, where I actually do have an amazing, I wouldn't say ability, but I just can switch off. So it's almost like two buckets, where home's home and work is kind of that workspace. So I feel like I rarely actually think about work stuff, which is really good. But yeah, in terms of the empathy drain, I don't know, not really. I think it's something that I've been able to pray into and pray over myself, so that's probably a God-given grace on
good.
that. So.
I've got a bit of a, I don't know how to word this one, but would you see, the success, what is the success rate of somebody coming through as a client and coming out the other side and just being like this completely different person? Because I imagine that is what motivates you.
Yeah.
That's probably how you'd get through empathy fatigue.
Yeah.
Would just be, seeing that client on the other side of all of what they've been through. What is like the real success rate of somebody getting through psychology, mentoring?
Yeah, such a good question. To be honest, I probably wouldn't know. Like, I could give you a quick fire number of, I don't know, probably 60 to 70%.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
But, I mean, I feel bad kind of shooting that shot without looking at the data, but,
in your own experience.
Yeah, I would say rarely have I had someone who hasn't gotten something out of it, which is really cool.
Obviously there's levels to that as well, because we were talking the other day, and it's one thing to obviously seek help from someone like yourself when things are really hard, but when things are actually going okay, there's still benefit in seeing someone, because they can always be better. And so whether you actually define that point as being like fixed, as okay, I'm coping with my everyday life now, as being the end point, or thriving as being the end point, it's a big difference.
Absolutely.
But I guess the beauty of clinical psychology or psychologists in general is that people can go to them in wherever they're at in that, and just seek improvement. And it's like physical fitness. You can always be fitter, you can always be stronger. It's the same in the brain.
That's right.
It must be such an incredible moment as a psychologist when you get to do the journey with someone, and then on the last session, what do? You just go, you've done so
Give them a
well.
high five.
Yeah, that's
you just reflect on all of the sessions you've had together, and you're like, all right, bye.
It is, it's super rewarding, because then, you feel, I mean, not that it's about you at all, but it's like you feel like you've helped them.
That's
which
awesome.
it is very rewarding, but then they feel like they've really gotten through stuff. And for that joint moment where you both go, I think you're tracking really well. Like, do you want to finish up? It's such a...
Wow.
It's a very cool thing. And, you know, as you were talking about, Isaac, even those clients that have such a huge difficult moment or difficult situation, and for them to even just get through that is for their life to be really struggling, and then for them to have breakthrough. Like, I obviously won't go into too much detail, but like a client comes to mind that during COVID, he couldn't get out of his room. He was in there for like 6 months, just because like germaphobe kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
He's now out in the community doing jobs, doing like just going to taverns, like hanging out with friends. And so that kind of stuff to go,
wow,
this is
such a
the
profound
impact.
change. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that kind of stuff is such a rewarding part of the job, where you go, that's a huge impact that has literally changed someone's life. Now they're out making a wage, meeting with friends, getting jobs, all that kind of stuff, living their best life, when it was so opposite before. So it is very cool.
I
Very,
love
very
hearing
rewarding.
stories like this, because I know that there will be people out there that want to study psychology, want to do it. And to hear stuff like that, you're like, yes, like making a difference in someone's life. Like, that's so incredible, Sam. What would you, like, were you a practicing psychologist when COVID-19 hit? Were you...
Ooh, I think I was...
2020
When's that? Yeah.
to 2021
I think I was actually just doing my master's, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We were doing a bunch of telehealth because we were trying to pivot with everyone else. So, yeah, it was a bunch of telehealth when that came in.
What, like, do you believe, like, was the impact of COVID-19 on society? Like, was that...
from a mental health kind of perspective?
In the psychologist field, did you have a lot of patients come in that were struggling from that epidemic?
Yeah, I'd say the big thing was probably isolation, like everyone. And I think the huge thing that people need is connection. So just for people to obviously be sucked inside of their houses, to not be going out working, there was a lot of depression, anxiety, being trapped inside of themselves was a huge thing that we would see. And then from that, like, a lot of social anxiety came because people were just not pushing themselves, not being comfortable with getting out of their house and getting out with connection and all that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, a lot of just people, limiting their abilities and getting comfortable with their comfort zone, really, because it shrunk so small during COVID. So for them to now have to instantly push out of that and grow and test themselves again was a massive thing that we saw a lot of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, obviously when you're at home, and I imagine we've probably experienced a lot of this ourselves, is sitting at home in front of a computer screen for days on end is just not healthy. We're made to go outside, expand, to conquer, purpose, all the phone.
Scrolling the phone and
100%.
social media.
Yeah, and overstimulating ourselves without the balance of output, a lot of input, but not output. So I think a mixture of those things is probably a huge impact that we saw over COVID. But people are doing really well getting out of that. So,
like, coming from a psychologist, social media, what is your take on social media and mental health?
A few different thoughts.
I think it's a bit of a personal question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely go down the opinion route. But I think, like, it's obviously, I think as we've all experienced, it can be so impactful on self-esteem, particularly in women. There's a lot of research around there around body image, self-esteem, social media, the impact on that, impact on happiness. There's that comparison trap that kicks in, that I need to be doing this, I need to be there, which impacts on depression as well. Probably the other one too is, this is kind of a different angle at it, but there's research coming out now, so not necessarily social media, but on screens.
Right.
that when we introduce screens to our kids early, around the ages of 4 or 5 and kind of up to 10, it actually helps, or not helps, but provides or creates situations and potential for symptoms of autism.
Wow.
So not to diagnose autism, so I'm not saying that because autism is neurodevelopmental, so you're born with it, but the same symptoms that an autistic person has, so rigid thinking, social, just no social engagement, not able to read social signs, emotional dysregulation, that kind of stuff. We see a lot of those symptoms in children and kids that have a lot of screen time. That's why you start, because a lot of dopamine is flooding in, they're getting hooked on it very early, they're not able to regulate themselves. So it's kind of a bit of a sideways answer, but that's the kind of stuff where our generation is so hooked on their phones, and it's creating this dopamine dependency.
Yeah.
This lack of real social connection like this.
Yeah. It's
Would
so
you say
tough. Like, most our viewers are young.
Yeah.
And it is such a generation of, social media. We stay connected and it's fun for a bit, but there are those toxic, like, everything in balance is good. But with our viewers that are listening, like, I know from a psychologist point of view, like, there would be mental challenges with that and going through school, and
Right.
it would just be tough. Even finding purpose, because you're constantly comparing and, you're not really...
Yeah, you're changing the level of what you think is success based on what you're looking at with everyone else.
Totally.
But from a psychology point of view, I mean, the interesting thing I find about that is if someone was looking to be a psychologist, the research aspect, like hearing you talk about those different studies coming out and so on, the people doing those, that's a fascinating job because you're doing work that's going to impact many people.
100%.
Like, I know that even now that Cianna and I are young parents, the information coming out about screens and stuff has definitely made us more weary of what we put on and when we put it on and so on, which is amazing because if we didn't have that information from people not doing that research, we would just not know.
Yeah.
And so I love it. And if there's people that are interested in psychology, maybe they don't want to do 7 years and be a clinical psych, but maybe they want to jump in and just learn more about the brain and how it works and thinking.
And the great thing about psychology is that it's such a broad field.
Yeah, totally.
Like, if you think about it, it's really just the study of human behavior. So that's a huge spectrum. That's personality to screens to connection to relationship to mental health to whatever. And they're always finding different concepts. They're really like, bridging and breaking it up. So it's a very, very cool and fascinating field.
I feel like it is such a broad field. Like, even thinking about an area of psychology that really interests me is like people that thrive under immense pressure.
Yeah.
And then obviously that many of us don't, and working out like why some people are so good when when it's hard. Like, I think about elite athletes, where they're going to shoot the shot like in immense pressure situations and they do so comfortably.
Yeah.
As opposed to seeing others crumble, and it's like, it's intense. I mean, with the Olympics this year, you see that we're going to see that on a massive level. But anyway, that area of psychology fascinates me.
Yeah.
But so would you say, like, so someone coming out of school wants to do psych, you said before, it's that kind of analytical mind, pattern recognition. What kind of, are you aware of many jobs that people can kind of get in that field outside of what you do?
Outside of like a psychologist?
Outside of like a clinical psych?
It's probably research is probably like the two main streams is psychology, like practicing psychologist, and then research. They're probably the two ones. I would say the great thing about a psychology degree is it is so like it's not going to limit you. It's something that can apply to a lot of things. So it's super helpful in terms of just understanding people, right? Because you're going to have that aspect of people in a stack of different jobs that you have. So just even understanding the theory of, thoughts lead to emotions, lead to behavior. Like even just understanding that is, session one of probably 90% of the sessions that I do, or even just the theories of, social psychology or the 5 different mainstreams of psychology, like knowing that and how understanding that a person's behavior is not just as black and white as we often think it is. There's so much going into how a person responds to something.
Yeah.
Is so powerful in a lot of different fields. So
true, it would kind of bleed into, that understanding would lead into whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Make you impactful, whether you're in business or whether you're in
marketing,
health, anything.
Yeah. Social media, all that kind of stuff. If you can understand how people tick, that's probably 70% of jobs out there, right? So, yeah, it is very helpful.
In terms of someone understanding themselves and how they tick, would you say, is there common warning signs or something that people could go try and recognize rather than waiting for a big plane crash? It's like the little radars going off. Do you talk to clients about recognizing different signs and things early and what they can do, or?
Yeah, as in in terms of their own, being aware of.
Yeah, being aware of things
symptoms.
rather than waiting till they have a full panic attack.
Yeah, gotcha.
Hey, when you notice this, this and this, it's leading this way. These are some things you can do. Is that kind of the stuff you do with some people?
Absolutely. Yeah, nailed it on the head. So with anxiety, for example, as you said before, it gets to a 8 to 9 to 10. We go, all right, what are the symptoms that you personally have when you're anxious? Is that beating hard? Is that some people, get sweaty, or some people have dry throat, or whatever it is. Can you notice those symptoms that are 4, 5, 6? And then when you do, let's do these strategies to then circumvent that so that you don't get to the 10s. Or, can you sit with that anxiety? Something that's coming out very quickly is that it's acceptance and commitment therapy, where I think the great thing about the rise of mental health is that it's becoming more talked about, which is great. But then also I think the downside is that people have a really bad stigma around anxiety. Anxiety is a human emotion. It's like sadness, it's like happiness. So for us to try and get rid of anxiety is like getting rid of a part of you being human.
Wow.
So what we need to do, and the silver bullet, and it's very simple but it takes a lot of work to get there, is just simply sitting with the anxiety like you would sadness, like you would with happiness, and being okay with being anxious. So that if we can get good and holding that resilience of just being anxious and going, hey, this is a symptom that's going on for me. I'm human, and that's okay. That level of awareness and acceptance is so powerful, because then you can go through any field or any situation that you're anxious and have that strategy and really sit with it and not being so impactful. So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, but it's very cool.
Accepting it for a moment, knowing that it may pass.
Yeah.
But so on the other spectrum of that, do some people fight it? Do they fight 100%. The anxiety and get guilty and angry and get worse?
Yeah.
Panic.
Yeah. So that's the kind of different tools that we have as psychologists, where for some people it might be a CBT approach, where it's, hey, let's challenge it. You're going on a plane and you're scared about a plane. Well, what are the odds that it will actually crash? Probably 1 in a million. Right? You're more likely to XYZ. So that's the CBT approach. The ACT, or the acceptance and commitment therapy approach, is, sitting with it. Hey, you're anxious about going on a plane. That's okay. And what that does is it just takes off that little bit of an internal struggle to feel like you have to always challenge it, you have to always fight, and gives you rest to go, you know what, this is okay, I can just sit in this, I'm human, there's stuff that I'm scared about, and just give yourself that grace. And oftentimes that's really powerful, just to be human.
I've had to learn that on a smaller scale. I remember the first time I had to suture someone, and
what's that?
Oh, stitch someone up, who's
that
got a wound or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember being anxious, and I just had to have a breath and just be like, it's normal to be anxious. I've never done this before.
Yeah.
I don't need to challenge it or whatever. I've just got to make sure I take a deep breath and stabilize my hands and just do a reasonable job.
Yeah. I mean, that.
But it's so true, because if you take away all anxiety, you're not going to be, you need a level of anxiety when you're crossing a road,
yes.
or you're not going to be in a state like of heightened awareness to be aware of cars.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
it's like saying all fear is bad. It's like, well, you need a degree of fear, otherwise you'll do something stupid and die, you know?
Absolutely. And and you've nailed it on the head, because anxiety is really there it's a protective mechanism, really. It's there to give you insight and help you be hyper vigilant to any dangers that are there. So someone without anxiety is going to jump on a motorbike and go 150 down the 60 probably school zone, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, we need that. And sometimes the anxiety gets too much and it's doing its job too well. And that's the areas where we'll talk about.
So true. It's like the motorbike going 10 kilometers an hour.
Yes.
And you're like freaking out.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so interesting. So there was I don't know what year it was. Was it 2021? I had panic attacks like that year. I never really had them before, and it was just a specific year. I just kept getting panic attacks, sometimes 2 in the same day. And I ended up seeking out a psychologist, and I saw her maybe several times. And we did CBT, which is why I wanted to ask you about it, because I think it's so cool. But it was very much around public speaking. So if anyone gave me
Which is so funny, because now you're sitting in front of a microphone.
I know. I feel the most inadequate. It's fine.
Yeah. No,
God
you're
asked
good.
me to do this, though.
Yeah.
I have to be obedient. But there was a year there where I was just panicking. But prior to, like throughout high school, if we had to do public speaking, I loved English. I was okay. I was more in I would accept it. I'd accept the anxiety. I was like, it's fine. So I find you, Sam, so inspiring. You are so like confident. You're like pinnacle, cool, calm, collected. You're just an amazing psychologist. Like I'd come and see you if I wanted to see another psychologist. But I wanted to ask you, were you always like this? Were you always very confident person? Very good at speaking, very good at articulating yourself? I would say you're an incredible public speaker. Like, have you always been like that? Bit of a personal question.
No, I love it. I love it. Short answer is that absolutely not. Like even right now, I don't feel confident. Like, I think we were talking beforehand, and it's a little bit cold in here, so I'm shaking in this seat right now because I'm like just shivering.
It is cold, guys.
But then the stuff that's going through my head is like just fighting that, what we call imposter syndrome. Like I'm on a podcast, right? I'm so young, as Isaac said. What right do I have to give my insight? That's where CBT does help, where you go like, well, no, like I've done my study.
True, you can challenge those thoughts.
Yeah, you can challenge those. I'm a professional in the field. I've got my accreditation. I've done my training, my supervision, all that kind of stuff.
It's like bringing the truth back into the picture.
100%, yeah. So, and that's something that I've had to work on. Like, something that I struggled with was actually social anxiety, probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and it's something that I still have to battle. And social anxiety is not the fear of people, it's the fear of being in a position where you think people will judge you.
Wow.
So the classic thing is public speaking. Why would I get up in front of everyone where if I stuff up, they're going to judge me? So the thing that I remember, there were days where I was in like a work office and I would just sit at the computer and like not want to talk to anyone because I was so fearful of being judged. And that's the side where it's like looking back there to where I am now, where it's like being on a podcast, public speaking, being articulate. It's like such a journey of having to push through that, accept it, a lot of it, and go, this is probably a challenge that I'm going to have to wrestle with. But that just makes me me. This is me. This is my thorn in the side, as it were. That makes me human. That in a lot of ways gives me humility, because I can run with my brain so much and go, hey, I'm doing so well in these fields. And then I have a moment of almost like the social anxiety comes back and go, oh, actually, no, like it's a reminder to be humble that I can't do everything in my own strength, kind of thing. So, but yeah, to answer your question a long-winded way, no, I absolutely struggle with anxiety, with the human stuff. Haven't always been confident. I don't see myself as confident. So when you say those kind of things, it's like, thank you, but You know, that like self-perception kind of wrestles with it a little bit. So
That's interesting.
And so, yeah, it's just a bizarre thing. And my wife is amazing. She's very supportive and she kind of says similar stuff. But, you know, I would get off the stage of public speaking and instantly there's the chatter of, you did this, you did that, you did that. And it's such a self-critical zone. And then you talk to other people and they go, what are you talking about? Like, that's not, like, no one saw that, right? But it's just that having to wrestle with that and accept it and go, that's always probably going to be there. And that's just a part of life. Yeah. And for me, relying on God in that realm.
Yeah, yeah.
Being out of the comfort zone, constantly pushing myself, all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
That's interesting. I found,
yeah,
like, one probably trigger point for me was, have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
great.
me to a T. It was like, I feel like first year science degree undergrad, I knew more than I do now.
Yes.
Which is completely not true.
What'd you say? Dunning-Kruger?
The Dunning-Kruger effect. So it's when you
Can
know
you
a
explain
little
it?
bit, you feel like you know a lot. And when you know a lot, you feel like you don't know anything. It's like the more you start to learn, the more you realize I don't know.
Wow.
And like the pinnacle of that is like you go into med school after doing science and yeah, the more you learn, the more you're like, I have no idea. And then the imposter syndrome starts because you're like, now I'm in this position, finished university, I have to make some level of decisions. Yes, I've got supervision and I've got boundaries and so on, but you can get in a position where you're just like overwhelmed and so on. And like you, I'm very lucky, not lucky, but like I feel like if I didn't have God in that situation, it would be far worse than it is. But I've got peace in those situations knowing that I can rely on God, that I've had the learning that I need to have. I've got the humility that when I feel uncomfortable or like a decision could be above my pay grade, so to speak, I know where to go and I'm not trying to make decisions that are out of my level.
And he's graced you to be
Exactly,
there.
and he's graced me to be there. So I'm like, I have that kind of foundation as well. But I feel for people that, get put in positions like we sometimes find ourselves in and don't necessarily have faith in God in those situations. But
I don't know how they do it. I mean, props to them in a lot of respects, but just having that, I don't know, that, it's probably a bad analogy, but that crutch in the best way possible to lean on.
yes.
Because I don't know how they push through on their own ability and strength and fight the kind of stuff that would naturally hit a person. So,
Do you feel like you would have found that career in clinical psychology without God, or do you think that was kind of...
I don't think I would have got there without God, to be like completely honest.
As in you wouldn't have thought to do it, or you wouldn't have backed yourself enough to go all the way?
Probably a bit of both, but then also like I genuinely believe that without, like, I was fighting against the current kind of thing. So for me to get here is God. Like I feel like I'm not anything special. There's other psychologists that I feel like would be much more suited, much more equipped. For example, the master's degree that I was trying to get into, there was 20 places. There was hundreds of applications. I managed to get in there with like GPs. Old doctors that were studying psychology, with researchers of psychology, with people who have run their own psychology business and were going back for more study. And here's like this, 25-year-old dude who's in there who's got like no experience. So in that respect, on paper, I had nothing to give, but I'm somehow in that cohort, and that for me is like, that's God. So that for me is why I'm like, I couldn't have done it without him. But then, I think there's probably some sort of supernatural guidance there too, where I feel like it kind of fits with my personality as well. It's just probably a combination of all those things coming together. But he's a huge impact in my career. So
it's awesome. So good. I love to hear it. You have an amazing testimony. You have an amazing, you suit a psychologist so well, your personality. And I mean it. You do seem so confident, cool, calm, collected. And now you get to help other people with those tools that you've learned along the way, where you may have not felt that originally, but you've just gained such a great wealth of understanding and knowledge in your field. And now not only are you stepping into it, but you're helping other people as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's like
So
lived
good.
experience. You know, you've had to challenge thoughts yourself. You've had to learn to sit with it. You've had to do all these things that you tell other people to do, which is really cool.
Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
the power of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that kind of keeps the interest ticking as well with your own learning, because as you're learning stuff, you can start to apply them. And do you find, more on a kind of funny note, do you find that you have that work hat on sometimes when you're not at work, obviously?
With your family on Christmas
analysing
Day.
people on Christmas?
Yeah. If my wife were here, she'd say yes.
Stop reading me, Sam.
Sam, take the hat
It's
off.
been a few times she's had to be like, Samuel, no, you're being a psychologist right now. I just need you to be a husband.
That's awesome.
Yes, and I have to be careful to filter my responses and not... I think the danger too is that people naturally then also come to you. So like with family, I feel like there's been a stack of family members that have come to me and gone, hey, what are your thoughts on this? I just need to vent, all that kind of stuff.
Opening up to you,
Yeah.
getting vulnerable,
That's hard, hey?
and
Yeah.
putting it on you.
Which is hard because you wrestle with the I want to help, because that's the empathy.
Yes.
But then also it's a spot where I just want to be me, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the difficulty, and you probably find this too, where people come to you and need advice or need help. And you always feel like you're giving. And so that's why, I talked about being an introvert, where that's the space where I feel like I can just, I don't have to give.
Haven't been sent any photos of rashes.
Yeah, no, I'll leave that
Randomly
to you.
get a photo and they're like,
I'll leave that
what's
to
going
you.
on? Here's a rash. I'm like,
My family member's a psychologist. Let me send him this photo of my rash.
I won't take
I'm
the
not a
rash.
dermatologist. I don't know what
Yeah.
your rash is. It's so funny though, because it's probably slightly different in psychology maybe, but correct me if I'm wrong. But like I remember talking to one of the oncologists at work, so cancer doctor, and he's like, once someone knows you're a doctor, they'll just ask you about whatever.
Yeah.
But he's like, obviously he's an oncologist, and so he's got an electrician that comes over to his house, and he's like, oh, you're a doctor. Well, my shoulder's pretty, and he's like going like this, and he's like, what should I do for it? And he's like, dude, I have no idea.
Yeah, I do
He's like,
cancer.
unless you have cancer, I'm useless. So it's quite funny. Like people kind of have that perception. Oh, you're a psychologist, but here's all my stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in some ways, and that's, you feel like you want to help, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you an answer, but yeah, it is, when you feel like you're out of your scope a little bit, it's like, oh, actually, it's a schizophrenia type thing. I'll leave that.
Yeah,
for
you're
me.
like, that's not me. That's not my question.
Yeah.
I don't have enough energy for that right now.
Yeah,
Love you, but
Get
That's
back to
funny.
you in 3 to 5
Do you have any
minutes.
kind of advice for maybe some budding psychologists, or some kind of things that they could do, or ways to pursue doing what you're doing? It can be anything from maybe habits that are good to start doing now through to maybe subjects they should be doing that might help. Anything really.
I think the big thing, particularly in a master's degree, that they're looking for is experience. So if you're genuinely thinking of being a practicing psychologist, if you can get experience quickly, or as quickly as you can,
And what would experience look like? Just
helping clients that are impacted by a particular thing. So whether that's mental health or NDIS or that kind of
so is this like
need.
your role? I remember you used to do a job where you used to.
I was a youth worker.
That's right. I wasn't sure what it was.
A youth worker. So I would help kids who pretty much didn't have homes. So, and a lot of them had, drug addictions, all that kind of stuff. So any demographic that needs help, if you can get experience with those, just so you can build that empathy, you can start to understand the diagnostic kind of channels, and not that you'll diagnose anyone in that space, but just to get that experience with those.
See what the
clients.
behaviours are. And okay.
Yeah, that's probably the main one.
And you can do those kind of experiences without having prior experience, if that makes sense. So like his youth work, stuff like that, can you go into that with no degree, or can you go into that?
That's probably a question for I suppose the interviewees or interviewers. I know for me, when I got into it, I think again the only reason I got in is because I was actually studying psychology at the time.
So it could be something you could do concurrently while you do your undergrad.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I did, yes. Yeah.
Cool.
But I think they were looking for, it's probably the classic, they were looking for experience.
Hear it all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
Do your degree and then they want experience.
It's like, I want experience. You're like, what? The
3
degree
years.
was the experience.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's really helpful though. Like, so if someone's going to pursue that, trying to find avenues that they can start doing now
Yes.
that expose them to that field.
Yes, and then to probably add to that, that's probably a good teasing out mechanism to see if you enjoy it.
True.
Because, you know, as we talked about, it's later on in the degree that you actually get the clinical experience. So if you don't
True.
enjoy that kind of giving, the empathy, all that, then
Well, that's what I liked about your wife's story is she did placement only a year into nursing and goes, this isn't for me, as opposed to
absolutely
going the full 3-4 years, getting to the end, and then you're working for a year and then you're 5 years down the track and you're like, I hate this.
Yeah.
Like, not that nothing's wasted, and I believe you always get experience in that. And then when you go do something else, some of that carries through for sure. But you'd rather pivot early,
Yeah.
make that decision as early as possible. And I guess that's a great point. Doing some of that work while you're studying will give you an idea pretty quickly whether you like it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I think do you have any questions?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good.
No.
Any final last words, or are you pretty...
No, not really. Just thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I think psychology
been
is
fun.
a great field, very rewarding. So
You've given us a great in-depth insight into the role of a
hopefully
psychologist.
not too deep. Yeah.
No, it's good.
No, it's
we
good.
loved
No,
it.
I
We
really
hope you
enjoyed
guys enjoyed it, listeners enjoyed it. And if you did, we'd love you to do the normal stuff, like, subscribe. It really helps the channel and helps other people get to hear these conversations as well. And hopefully it helped you.
Yeah, if you know anyone that wants to be a psychologist or study it, make sure you share this link with them. We'll also link, Sam actually has his own psychologist clinic.
Yep.
So we'll link all of his details down in the description so you can have access to that. But we shall see you guys on our next episode.